Observances are taking place throughout the country to honor the transformative leadership in civil rights by Martin Luther King Jr. The events coincide with the 50th anniversary of his assassination on April 4th. Among the events honoring Dr. King is a memorial service being hosted tomorrow night by the faith community who served while studying in Boston, 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury. We'd like to welcome its associate pastor, Reverend Jeffrey Brown. Thank you very much for being with us, Reverend.
Good to be with you again.
I want to start with your own recollections of 1968. You were a bit younger than I was,
Yep.
but you have something that stays with you. Talk about that.
Well, I was 5 or 6 years old at the time when King was tragically shot. I remember two things. I remember my mother allowing me to go out and to play while the funeral was happening, while she watched it on television. And I remember it being really unusual because I wasn't really a good kid the day before, so I was expected to be in the house, but she, let me play. And the second thing I remember was when I was in school, in class, the teacher had me come to the front of the class and to talk about what it was like to be an Afro-American. I was the only black kid in the class at the time, which I really didn't have a lot to say, about that. So,
Of course, one of the things that makes this date memorable, even for me when I was growing up, is that there was nobody in the black community, the population in America, who had the stature, just this pervasive recognition that King did.
Yeah.
Why is that so significant?
Well, I think that, for many people, you had Dr. King as the symbol of progress within the black community. We had other leaders that we looked to within the community, but King stood out, because he wasn't only a leader for the African American community, he was a leader for the entire world. He really, in his last years, concentrated on changing the ethos of the country and the soul of the world, if you will. And I believe it was those actions and his intentions to reorder society, that got him killed.
This is a growth process that continued to the end for Dr. King. There was a period when that growth meant coming up to the north, studying at Boston University, and learning, how to be a minister at 12th Baptist Church.
Yep.
You're going to have a great authority talking about that tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah. The Reverend Dr. Michael Haynes was his pulpit mate, if you will, at 12th Baptist Church. And he is going to be the main speaker for our memorial celebration. And he's been telling me stories over the course of conversations that we've had that I know that for those who will be attending, it will be just a rich, rich moment.
Now, in those times, you had Michael Haynes and Michael King.
Yeah, absolutely. His given name was Michael King. He changed it to Martin later on. But you had two Mikes in the pulpit, and to his closest friends, Dr. King would have them call him Mike. And so when Dr. Haynes refers to Dr. King, he always refers to him as Mike. And so just to hear that banter between the two as they were both in the pulpit, learning the craft of preaching and pastoring, and with Dr. King, of course, going to BU School of Theology, Dr. Haynes had a lot to look up to, in Dr. King.
What about the last time he saw Dr. King? Did he tell you anything about that?
He told me that the last car ride that he had with Dr. King was after an event that occurred, I believe it was in '67. And he wanted Dr. Haynes to drive him to the airport. And so as they were driving to the airport, Dr. Haynes told me that Dr. King knew that he wasn't going to be living longer. And what he started to talk about were the regrets around that he would regret not being able to see his children grow up or to walk his daughters down the aisle, for marriage, to see the accomplishments that they would have of growing old together he talked about those things with Dr. Haynes as they drove to the airport. And Dr. Haynes told me that as he was leaving and going into the terminal, that he got the sense that that this might be the last time he would see him.
What about recollections of Coretta Scott, who was his future wife, that he met in Boston? The
Yes.
Reverend can say something about that too?
Well, he talked about Mary Powell, who was the secretary to the pastor at that time, who was William Hester. And Dr. King was, of course, matriculating at BU, but he was also dating. And he was really looking to settle down. And Mary Powell knew someone at the New England Conservatory because she was also a student at the New England Conservatory, and she introduced the two of them together. As I understand it, it took a while for them to get together because Miss Coretta Scott wasn't, too interested at first, but I believe she said in her autobiography, he grew on her.
What about the importance of his time in Boston to, I guess, developing his ability to speak to the whole nation? He wasn't just speaking to one congregation or one race.
No, he really was intent on being something different and delivering something different. He was taught by excellent scholars at Morehouse College. Dr. George Kelsey was his theology professor, who also happened to be a graduate of the Andover Newton Theological School in 1937, along with Richard Owens, who eventually was the longtime pastor of People's Baptist Church. And so with Dr. Kelsey and, of course, Benjamin E. Mays, the president of Morehouse, and another mentor of his, he really wanted to blend intellectual rigor with the preaching craft. And he wanted to help change the direction of black preaching at that time. And so, Boston was this cauldron of young scholars and young ministers who really wanted to take the blending of social action with the preached word. And they would have discussions at his apartment on Mass Avenue. And, it was a really exciting place for those young, budding African-American leaders. And 12th Baptist was one of those hubs.
Well, what do you say to young leaders today that they can really learn from Dr. King that they might not have been able to pick up on their own?
Yeah, the nation has always embraced the I Have a Dream speech of 1963, but I would really urge young leaders to look at the last 2 years of Dr. King's life, last 2 or 3 years of his life, particularly when he started to trek up north and when he started to concentrate on the triple evils that plagued the world, which was militarism and poverty and racism. And to look at his thinking around that, because I really believe that he was going somewhere with that. There's a preacher by the name of William Barber who is reviving, the Poor People's Campaign. I really think that we need to think about how, as a world, we're going to be able to make it through this century that we're in right now, because it's not going to become more homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. And so there's going to be more people and more diversity. And who'd have thought that someone like Rodney King would be a prophet when he said, can we all get along? I really think that's going to be the challenge for this century. And for young leaders, we have to figure that equation out.
I'm sure there will be more on that note tomorrow night at the church. And exactly what time is this service going to be?
It's on Tuesday, April the 3rd, 7 o'clock.
And for people who have not been there, this is on Warren Street, very close to Dudley Square?
Absolutely, 150 Warren Street, and there's plenty of parking across the street and on the side where the church is.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Reverend Jeffrey Brown from 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury. Still to come, we'll hear about efforts to promote smart growth in Massachusetts. But first, this message.